We keep getting spicy in these podcast episodes. One of the number one questions I get asked, I don't think I've fully shared that story. I knew that I had it in me to be good at whatever that thing was. The pandemic hit. It was just really, really difficult. Entrepreneurship is hard, it's tough. Being an entrepreneur really challenges your mindset. Whew, we keep getting spicy in these podcast episodes. Woo, okay, I'm kind of spilling the juice today. One of the number one questions I get asked, how did I start my business? How did I become an entrepreneur? Where did this come from? I'm gonna tell the story today. And it was crazy to me when I had this thought of realizing I don't think I've fully shared that story. Maybe I'm just in a storytelling mood today, but I couldn't believe I've talked about it a bit on my social media, but if you listen to my podcast, especially my guest podcast episodes, you know that this is one of my favorite questions to ask people is how did you get started? What did that look like for you? What did you learn through all of that? And I would love to share mine as well, because I think people are curious. I mean, I love hearing about people's lives and just stories, especially with entrepreneurship. I feel like everyone has both such a unique and similar story in a sense of how they got into it, why they got into it, similar, roadblocks or struggles that come up along the way. And I would love to take you back to Sydney in high school, because I feel like that is a very defining point for a lot of people, where you really start getting the pressures of where are you gonna go to college? What are you gonna study? What are you gonna do? What are you good at and talented at? And for me, I always felt like this person that had two sides of myself. I always felt like this person who we now call it multi-passionate. I really didn't have a term for it at 16 years old. But I felt like I had this side of me that was very creative and loved dance and art and music, and then there's this other side of me that was very structured and logical and loved lists and organization. And so I knew I had these two parts of myself that I always kind of felt were fighting each other, which I look at that differently now. But I was never that person who had that one and only dream of I want to be a doctor, I want to be a big shot CEO living in New York City, I want to be a nurse. I didn't have that. I knew whatever I was going to do was going to be big and important, and I was going to be successful. I knew that I had it in me to be good at whatever that thing was, but I also didn't see myself doing one thing. I didn't see myself being able to commit to one quote unquote career or job for the rest of my life. And so what that kind of started was and where I really started seeing these patterns within myself was in high school. I was definitely the person who was balancing all different sorts of things. I was doing dance. I was in the AP classes and cared about my academics and clubs, and I was in student government, and I was oh my God, I can't even remember now at this point, but just involved in the musical and orchestra and choir and show choir and theater. There were just so many things that I was a part of and doing. I was also part of this club called DECA, which I used to be able to know that acronym off the top of my head, what that stood for. I could not tell you now for the life of me. But it was basically a business competition club in a sense, where You could either compete individually, you could compete in a partnership in these different categories. And these different categories, mine, just take a guess, take a wild guess, because you'll never get it, I promise you, was business law and ethics. So at that time, one of my friends came to me, she's like, hey, be in DECA with me. I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. She's like, do it with me, you'll be so good at it, like, do it. Convince me. And then she tells me it's business law and ethics. And I'm like, girl, I guess tell you how to be ethical. I know nothing about law, no idea. And she was like, no, we'll learn and study, and I'll handle that stuff. You handle the creative stuff or whatever. And I was like, okay. I literally had no idea what I was getting myself into. So we start these club meetings and kind of prepping for these events that you would go to. And you have to take this, I think, written or multiple choice quiz first to qualify. And then basically what you do once you go to these events is you get a prompt where you have to role play and kind of pitch ideas to a business. I don't even know what this was called at the point, but a business developer or executive or something. So the prompts would be okay, you have this issue that's going on in your business where it's I remember the first one was a water bottle company, and there was some ethical thing that happened, and you basically had to figure out what campaign or pitch to put together to resolve this. And all I remember this moment clear as day, where this was one of the first times where I was like, oh my God, I think I'm kind of good at this. This is fun. This is easy and exciting, where I was literally putting together a PR campaign and comms marketing plan, where I remember I had this piece of paper and I was drawing a social media post, and I was these are the hashtags we're gonna use, and it just it came to me in that moment. And then I knew I was pretty good at presenting. I was pretty good at talking to people and getting my ideas across. And so we were just talking to, this person. I really don't even know who they were, but they were business professionals. And we pitched the whole idea. They'd ask us questions. And I came out of that feeling okay, I have no idea if that was what we were supposed to do or if that was good, but I felt that felt good to me. And so we're at this event, and all of a sudden we end up winning first in our category, and I am bewildered. I cannot believe this. I'm oh my God, so that was good. That was on the right track. And so now we're okay, I think we're on to something here. And so we start going to the next level, where I believe it was regional, and then you go, or state, or you keep going upwards. Maybe it was state, and then it was I don't know, I can't remember. So we go on, and I'm okay, I'm gonna kind of try and take this a little bit more seriously, and do the same thing. Next event, first place in our category. And I am just, again, I'm oh my God, I cannot believe this. So we end up qualifying to go to, I think it was internationals or nationals, or the biggest event that they have for this club. And so we go, and I can't remember if this was junior or senior year. I think it was junior year. And so we go to the international, and we don't end up placing 1, 2, or 3. There was so many people there, which we weren't expecting, but we still felt pretty good about our pitch and everything. And so I'm okay, there's on to something here with business. me and my partner ended up being presidents of the club our senior year. We ended up getting first again in like the other, events, like kind of repeating what we had done the previous year. And at this point, what I did senior year was starting to take like more marketing classes and business classes and becoming like more involved in the business department, where, a lot of the, again, it's high school, but a lot of my high school teachers were like, I think you can do something here. I think you're like talented in this space. And I was like, okay, like maybe, this is something. At the same time, I was still doing all of my like dance stuff, and I was in the, the musical, and had a lot of these other things that I was doing. So that was high school Sydney. And at this point, I had gotten into college. I was going in undeclared, but I knew that I wanted to go to like a liberal arts college focused on the humanities, because that was overall, I was looking for places that had like a good business and good like arts department, because I didn't know what that looked like. But nope, that didn't happen yet. I was like gonna jump way ahead. So get into college, and I know myself at this point, like I know what I don't want. Like I don't want to, be a nurse, to be an accountant, or be a teacher, or like science. Like I didn't want any of that stuff. And what I kept feeling was like this marriage of finding a way to connect like the business side of me and like the creative, like artsy side of me. And as I began taking more classes, I was realizing that that major was communication arts. And so my second semester freshman year is when I ended up declaring communication arts. And I loved it because I felt like it was that perfect marriage, in a sense of there was this really logical, structural side to it with like business and management. And then there was this other side to it of like marketing and PR, and where I could be like have creative outlets, and I was taking like photography and like graphic design classes and music classes, and I really got to have kind of like the best of both worlds, in a sense. And I would kind of like not given up on the dream, but I was like, I don't think I'm gonna be like a professional dancer or like a professional performer. Like I was on the dance team in college. I was the president for 2 years of the dance team in college. And I was also an RA for 3 years in college, which was a whole other thing. But all of that taught me a lot of leadership skills, a lot of being able to balance and handle many different things at once, where I had my academics, I had my job as an RA, I also had few other jobs throughout college. I was working multiple jobs typically at a time. I had president of dance team and just living my life as well, which it was a lot, but it gave me a lot of skills, and how to handle conflict and how to manage people and deal with a lot of different kinds of people. And so all throughout college, I was like going through those steps. And then I ended up taking a class where the professor had her own business and she did marketing. And that was really my first glimpse into kind of seeing how entrepreneurship fit into the picture. While this was going on, and I'll get into like kind of where that took me, but speaking of entrepreneurship, I got put into these entrepreneur classes where at first I was like, oh, okay, cool. Like, I think I can learn something from this. And it got to the point where I was like, okay, if I take like 2 or 3 more like classes in this entrepreneurship category, I can minor in entrepreneurship. And I was like, like I've kind of enjoyed these classes. Like it was again, kind of like reminded me of DECA, where I was like, I think I'm kind of good at this. Like this feels good to me. I was developing like business plans and like, again, marketing campaigns. And I was like, yeah, like, I'm getting good feedback. And So I was like, all right, I'm gonna minor in entrepreneurship as well. I also minored in music because again, I like loved music, and I had been playing instruments for a while and all these other things. It's sad I don't really do much with that anymore. But I was like, all right, I'm gonna major in communications, minor entrepreneurship music, and I was in this class for my major, and I think it was a public relations class. So this is where I met that professor who had her own business. And I also needed to take an internship as part of my requirement to graduate. I believe it was my honors thesis was a different thing, but I end up working with this person who had, her own business, and I ended up interning for her. And this is where we were writing like blogs in the class. Like that was my first time like writing a blog. My boyfriend and I at the time were kind of experimenting with like an Instagram type of blog. And I ended up starting to do like her social media. So doing like her marketing, developing like posts, and that was like all of my first glimpse into this world. At this point, I had like no thought in my mind that I was gonna like start my own business with this. Like this was not, it's so funny because like telling this story, it seems so obvious where this is going. But when I tell you at the time, like I truly still had no idea. Like I didn't. Like I did find like in my graphic design classes, we had like a social media like section, and I was like, okay, like again, this is easy. This feels good. I feel like I'm like good at this. And there would be, I guess, like little hints here and there. And so also my senior year, I needed to write an honors thesis to graduate. And I chose to do it about blogging and kind of like, is blogging dead? Is it not dead? And like, these were things like my peers were not talking about, like we're just not doing, right? And like they were also looking for jobs that were more like, working at like companies and, being hired, as full-time employees. And at this point, I was more immersed into the entrepreneurship side of things. When I graduated, I end up working for like continuing kind of my internship in a sense, but through as a job. And I end up not only doing social media for this, this business, but then bringing on like specific social media management clients that I, was managing through this business. And at that point, I mean, when I tell you I like learned everything from like ground zero, like I am telling you, I was like, okay, like I'm just gonna try and like learn as much as I can, learn from other people, like apply what I know about marketing and business and all of these things. And so really just learning as I went and just using the skills that I had developed to like help me navigate. But they're working for an entrepreneur. I learned a lot of like just the back end business type of stuff, and like what were launches and programs, and like what did that look like what do you need to do for like invoices and proposals and like client management, and just there was just a lot of the behind the scenes that I literally just had no idea, like even the mindset stuff that goes along. And so I was just like a sponge. Like I was really just absorbing as much as I could, learning about marketing, learning about social media. And I mean, this sounds like a beautiful, like pretty story, but like truthfully too, on the other side of it, like there were times when I was just, it's different than working with like a full company, right? Where you have like that security and that stability, and like you have like a set salary and like benefits. And like for me, especially having just graduated college, like it was just like a big shift for me. Like that first year post-grad was really difficult. Like my boyfriend and I had like moved out and gotten our own apartment together, like the pandemic hit. It was just really, really difficult. And I was, not necessarily making like the amount of money that I wanted to be making. And I had like flexibility and time, which was great. But I was also alone a lot because my boyfriend at the time, he was, not like my boyfriend at the time, my boyfriend at this time was, taking the train into Boston for work, working like a 9 to 5 type of thing. And I was like working from home, like by myself. And that was still kind of strange in like 2019, 2020. Like a lot of people weren't doing that. And I was, again, fresh out of college. All my friends were just working kind of like normal jobs, or I'd like move back home. And so I wasn't really around my family or friends. My family was close by, but it was really challenging. And at that point, I felt like I was doing a lot of inner work that maybe I didn't even know I was doing at the time. And I learned a lot in that season. I learned a lot about myself, about what I truly want out of life. Again, like the pandemic kind of hit as well. And there were definitely low points of just kind of like trying to figure out like dealing and paying taxes as like, quote unquote, like freelancer. Like I was working for this company, but I was like still technically like kind of, freelancing, how the structure was. And I just ended up kind of like towards the end of 2020 just like becoming very like unhappy with where I was at, and knowing that something needed to change, and just feeling like I think that I can do this on my own. Like I think that I'm in a place now where I could run my own business and like offer these services, on my own. And I was like, then that was really hard for me to come to, like really, really difficult. I sat on that for months. But at the same time, like I knew I was like capable. I just kind of needed the confidence to like go out and do it. And I feel like anyone from the outside would be like, oh yeah, like you're so confident. How could you not like have been, confident? But like that's still something I definitely do struggle with, and like really did struggle with at that time, where especially with my age, feeling like no one was going to take me seriously, and like who would want to hire me, and like it's imposter syndrome coming into, right, where I was like, I don't know everything, like I've never run a business before, like I just, it's really humbling, like it's really starting from nothing. And so I took some time end of 2020 to like set myself up in the back end, my business of like getting a website, my socials, my branding, like all that stuff. And it was kind of just like that leap of faith moment of like taking a risk. And like I honestly sometimes can't even believe that I did that. And I was like, all right, like we're gonna do this. You're gonna start your business. Like at this point too, we had moved back home to, it's like, again, this story is kind of crazy as I'm like speaking this out loud, but we were living in my mom's basement, like for many different reasons, but like one of them being our lease had ended from where we were living. Lucas was kind of in the works of possibly getting his next job, which was going to be somewhere we'd be moving, which ended up being Seattle. So we did end up moving, where we didn't want to sign a year lease anywhere because we kind of felt like we would be moving in less than a year. Also, just to help like save money on rent and everything. Again, we're in the middle of a pandemic. So we ended up moving with our puppy into my mom's basement, which very grateful for that experience. But again, it was like a whole season of growth and trying to figure it out. So I literally started my business in my mom's basement, and nothing was perfect. No condition was perfect. Like Lucas and I were in this very tiny space with our puppy trying to figure it out. and I launched my business beginning of 2021. What a year 2021 was. I launched it, and in probably less than a month, I was booked out, and it was growing so much faster than I could believe and or keep up with. Like, which, again, there's two sides of this of like, I was so grateful for that. And at the same time, I went through a really challenging first 6 months of 2021. Probably some of the lowest points of my life, where starting a business brought up all of this like trauma I had and my tendencies and limiting beliefs and doubts and fears and just all of the things that you kind of like push down. I feel like when you start a business, you can't do that. Like I don't know what it is. It's like being an entrepreneur really challenges your mindset. And again, being like, I don't want to say like inexperienced, but like I still had a lot of lessons to learn. And not only was I learning how to run a business, I was learning how to try and manage all these clients now from my perspective, deal with the workload, deal with trying to learn the back end of things as well, and trying to manage all myself. Like literally doing everything myself, like the bookkeeping, the marketing, the sending proposals, invoices, contracts, dealing with the like managing where each client was, doing all the client work, like customer service, like literally everything. And also at this time, what ended up happening is we find out that Lucas gets the job that's in Seattle, which was, great and very exciting. Also, oh my God, there's so much of this, it's all like coming back to me, and I'm like, whoo. He gets this job, which is great, but we have to literally drive him cross country to start this job. And at this point, I am also teaching dance and fitness classes as well. So I'm balancing my business, 2 other jobs, and we were like, okay, I can't, like I couldn't join him at first because I had to finish up like these other kind of jobs and things that I had back at home. I was part of like a dance company as well. And so we're like, all right, I think like we have to be apart for like, not like break up or anything, but like we just have to physically be apart for 3 months. And so in February of 2021, we drove cross country with our dog, again, kind of a puppy at this point, and drove cross country. I've kind of talked about this in our like episode with Lucas and I together, but so, and then I fly back out with Honey, and I'm by myself for 3 months in my mom's basement. Honestly, thank God, like my mom and sister were around, because again, that was just like a very low, like dark season of my life where I was honestly like so stressed and anxious and depressed, like for those 3 months. And I know a big part of it was like that Lucas, wasn't there, and I was so used to being with him like 24/7. I was having to deal with like taking care of the dog by myself, and also like starting this business. And I was working like literally 24/7. Like I was waking up, starting work at 7 or 8, working until 7 or 8, like just trying to like get sleep and just dealing with so much crap like during those hours of working, and working on the weekends, again, balancing these 2 other jobs, dance company I'm a part of. Like I was just like a shell of a human. Like I was just going through the motions and like trying to take it day by day and like figure it out because there was so much on my plate. And I was like, okay, things have to change. Like, I cannot do this all by myself. So at that point, I was like, all right, I need to hire support. I need to get my back end like systems set up. Like, this cannot take a back seat anymore. I need to figure out like what clients I want to work with and don't want to work with. There were so many like, I don't want to like call it bad experiences, but there were so many bad experiences during that time of dealing with clients and people who were just like, and I'm not like blaming, you know, entirely other people. I know like I was, you know, obviously like busy, but I don't think I was like not managing it either. Like, I'm a very organized person in general. But yeah, there's just so many situations that honestly I feel like I kind of have like PTSD from, or like just like kind of like get triggered by certain things because of that. And so it was really taking a toll on my mental health. But going along with that, that was the first time like I was making money, like, where I was like, oh my God, like, the business is doing well, and like I'm able to like really support myself. And so like those were like good and like proud moments of like hitting, you know, certain months of like 10K months, 15K months, 20K, like those things. But at the same time, I was just like not doing okay. So, but once I moved to Seattle in June, that was also a big shift of like things changing, where I was really able to change things around in my business and things were feeling better and just really just getting clearer on things. And it's so crazy that that was like 2 years ago. And now I'm in my 3rd year of business, and 2022 was really like, again, another kind of like pivotal year for different reasons. But it's so crazy to look back on all of those things, and like, that is my story, that is my journey. And I know a lot of people have gone through similar instances of like, you kind of just get to the point where you're like, okay, you know, I can do this. Like, I'm gonna take that jump and go for it. And you just do what you gotta do to like make it happen. And those messy first stages where you may grow, you know, too fast or too slow, and you're trying to deal with like, you know, quote unquote, the consequences of that. And again, for me, like, I'm very grateful for it all. It's all taught me a lot, but still challenging. Entrepreneurship is hard, it's tough. Like, it just is. And I try to explain it to people who aren't entrepreneurs, which is totally fine, but I feel like you don't necessarily know unless you're in it, which is why it's so important to have people who are in your community and who are entrepreneurs and who can really understand the challenges. And why I, you know, ended up starting my mentorship for other social media managers who were dealing with a lot of the same struggles that I was dealing with at first too, and just like helping them get through it, because I've learned so much. So, wow. That's my story. It's so crazy when you speak it out loud and you start seeing the full picture of everything. And I'm sure there's like a million things I also left out, but I feel like those are kind of the main milestones that like come to my mind. But I'd love to hear from you. If any of this resonated with you, if you're like, yeah, me too, if you enjoyed listening to this storytelling session, and whether you're watching this on YouTube, whether you're listening through the podcast, it helps me so much if you could subscribe, follow, like this, leave a review, leave a comment. Anything is super helpful for me, and I'd be so grateful. So thank you so much for being here. Love you all. Mwah.